program, a movie about a collegiate football team looking to make a bowl game, and Little Big League, a film about a child who inherits the Minnesota Twins, not to mention a few others I need to see after looking this website. Duane, thank you for joining me.
No problem. Great to be here.
The first time I met you was on the sideline at Palos Verdes High School, and you were an assistant on the football team where your oldest son, David, was a lineman, a linebacker, jack of all trades. Now, I was taken back because the program is one of my favorite football movies.
Wow.
How often do people tell you they're shy about approaching you because of this role or some of the other roles that you've portrayed?
You know, that is so funny because, you know, when I was acting, it was so funny because guys in the business used to tease me that I was king of the sports movies. So anything with a ball in it, Duane has been in. And it was kind of funny, but I am shocked that people still recognize me from the program, Necessary Roughness, you know, Tyson, Digstown, all these sports movies that were done so long ago. It always takes me aback, and people will take me aback. I once had somebody say, "Hey, I'm glad to see that your leg got better." And it was funny because when I was in college, I actually blew out my ACL. So I said, "Oh, well, thank you." Because I didn't know this, but I was like, "Oh, thank you." He said, "Yeah, you're getting around pretty good." And I said, "Oh, well, thank you very much. I stay in pretty good shape." He starts laughing and goes, "You know, I'm talking about the program." I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you." So, yeah, it's funny what people will remember.
Now, what pushed you into acting aside from that injury?
You know, acting was always something I wanted to do. And I kind of told myself once I got done with school, when I came home, I was going to start taking acting classes and try to put things together from there. So, you know, kind of thing, you know, I studied acting for probably 2 straight years, went out and got an agent. And then literally, because one of the things, you know, in our family, I was kind of blessed with pretty decent genes. So I could always play younger than I actually was. So pretty much my first 3 to 4 years, I was high school bullies and everything else, from television shows to even some of the movies that I did. And, you know, that's kind of how the whole progression started.
But you only slept in summer school. You weren't a bully in summer school.
You know what? Which was rare because I typically was. But no, that's funny. I'm shocked people will come up to me and talk to me about summer school. It's like, wow, probably the one that shocks me the most that people even recognize me was Beetlejuice. Well, I'm like, wow, you recognize me? I don't know if that's a good thing. You know, but it's fun.
That's one movie that when I went through your IMDb, I said, he was in Beetlejuice? How come he's the dumb jock? Why has he got to be the dumb jock?
Dumb football player number one, I think. Dumb football player number one. Yeah, that movie, I knew from the first day when I walked on that set, even when I met Tim Burton, you know, in my audition, I knew that he was a different guy. And as compared to some of the other directors I had worked with at that time. And then that first day, you know, on the set, looking at all the different sets and everything, I was like, whoa, this movie is either going to make 100 million or 2 cents, because this is out there. And sure enough, it was huge.
He's done some amazing stuff. My son just started watching Edward Scissorhands yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
He's 9. And I told him that he was the same director as Nightmare Before Christmas.
That too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
he's done even Batman Returns with
Absolutely.
Danny DeVito and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah. No, he had an animation background, and he truly is an artist. He is one guy that, because I had seen him a couple times after I did Beetlejuice, and always was just a very cordial, good man. I really liked him.
Now, to me, the program is a timeless football movie, not only about the rigors of football, but also a lot behind the scenes. What are some of your favorite memories from making that movie?
Wow, there's so many. You know, one of the things that was so interesting about that movie, and I can just kind of give away how old I am, but um, I was 30, 31 when I did the program, and I'll just never forget because I had actually done a football movie before, Necessary Roughness, and I was a receiver in that, and it was the same stunt coordinator and technical advisor for football wise. So I was kind of familiar with how he worked. Well, it's a weird story with the program. So I was one of the last guys to be cast, and they had a football camp for probably like 3, 4 weeks prior to me getting. And I got there literally the week we started filming. So I missed this entire 4 or 5 week football camp. And so I didn't know what the tempo was going to be. I didn't know. I get up there, and either guys had just got cut or they had just stopped playing college football. So all these guys were in pretty good shape, all Division I guys, because for the most part, we shot the bulk of the football stuff at the University of South Carolina. And I mean, I did not know how it was going to go. And because I had a football background, the director wanted me to do a lot of my own stuff. And I will tell you, the first day, the first shot that I had was um, me talking to that running back in that sequence when I'm talking to the running back from Mississippi State. And I'll never forget the first take. Once we started doing the live hitting, I'm looking at the fullback, and his eyes were big as saucers, and his hand was shaking. And I'm like looking at him, and I'm going, okay, this dude is either a brilliant actor or this is real. This is going to be live. And the first time, I mean, bam! I mean, woo! It was a collision. And, because of the male ego too, I'm sitting there saying, okay, I'm not going to say anything. Take two, same thing, bam! I re-injured pinching the nerve in my neck. So I'm having these stingers going down my arm. So I finally grabbed the kid and I said, hey man, we are going to be doing this numerous times. I said, Alvin Mack is an All American. Make me look good. So when I take on your block, it doesn't have to be you giving me your best block. I win. And he looked at me and said, oh, okay. And from that day, it was kind of cool. But I will tell you, the hitting in that movie, it let me know that I did not miss football.
I can imagine. There's some scenes in that where it's like, taking guys' heads off. The
Yeah.
guy that played Steve Latimer, he's just, I know he's the steroid junkie on the team, and he's like a train, he's like a Mack truck.
Yeah. That was actually the second movie I had done with Andy. And he took his training so serious for the program because, he was like a former Mr. Teenage USA. So he had a bodybuilding background. And I will tell you, it was such a trip because he was kind of telling me about stuff, and you're trying to gauge it. But even Andy had an interesting conversation because guys were looking at him and they were trying to gauge just how good of a football player he was, and he had never really played, especially not at a high level, and he got his tooth knocked out. It was just, like I said, it was amazing, just the physicality with that movie.
Now, the cast on that movie has a lot of top actors, including Halle Berry, Christy Swanson, Omar Epps, and James Caan, who was the coach of Eastern Carolina University. What was it like working with the Corleone Consigliere?
Uh, that was probably one of the biggest moments of my career working with him because, I think the first movie I ever saw in the theater when I was a little kid, and my mom took me, was The Godfather. So to be working with Sonny Corleone was unbelievable. And what a great man he was. I really miss Jimmy. He was another guy that I probably saw him maybe 6 weeks prior to his passing. We would meet up at UCLA and watch practice. And man, I miss him. He was a good man, really good to me.
I don't know why I thought he was a consigliere when the minute that I said that, the minute that it came out of my mouth, I said no. That's Santino. That's
Santino,
not.
yes.
That's not.
Not
That
Tom. Not
no,
Tom.
not yeah, not my brother Tom. That was Sonny.
Yes. Yes.
Now, your father Willie was a Hall of Famer with the Green Bay Packers, and he's in that picture behind you alongside Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Martin Luther King. What were some things that he taught you that you still hold on to today?
Probably the biggest thing was, my dad was a very passionate guy when it came to things he was involved in. And he really felt it was important that whatever you choose to do, just do it with great passion. So to this day, that's what I still try to hold on to, whether it was, I went back in 2000. He wanted to either sell a company he and my mother had started back in the 70s, or he wanted me to come back and work with him. So in 2000, I went back to work with him, and I'm currently still working with the company. And, um, you know, when times get just kind of tough, I just think about him and the passion he approached work with every day, and it gets me through those tough times.
Now, can you describe the photo that's behind you? There are a lot of well known men in that picture, but what's going on there?
Absolutely.
What are we looking at?
This is the Black Athlete Summit. So what it was Jim Brown got together a bunch of the top black athletes, and they were all standing behind and supporting Muhammad Ali and his choice not to go to Vietnam. So this is kind of a famous picture where they all got together in Cleveland to support Muhammad Ali. So you have Bill Russell, like I said, Jim Brown, at the time Lou Alcindor, but we all know him as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the rest of the gentlemen that were up here, all athletes at the time. As a matter of fact, my father, he had just won the first Super Bowl. So I always kind of laugh at that picture and his face in it because, they had just won the Super Bowl, And typically Lombardi didn't like guys to get themselves in the public eye. And at the time, this was a big deal, a really big deal.
And I am correct. I do see Martin Luther King standing behind Muhammad Ali, correct?
No, that's not him. No.
Okay.
But yeah, this is it's a famous picture, and all these athletes were here to support Muhammad Ali.
Now, you, like I said earlier, you were a coach. What was the transition like from playing to coaching? What were some of the biggest differences?
It's funny because, when you're playing, I can remember when I was playing, I would say, man, I could never be a coach. Well, with my oldest, when he started playing Pop Warner, that first year when David was like 9 years old, I said, you know what? Okay, let me go to the practice and see, what's happening. And I go to the practice, and they started doing a tackling drill. And it was lining up kids, 10 years old, 10 yards apart, and having them have this collision. And I'm just looking, going, okay, this is kind of scary. So, I just kind of said, you know what? I'm going to start coaching because I want my kid to learn the right fundamentals and, not get hurt. And so, I started coaching with that coaching staff and started getting into coaching and really liked teaching and, working with the kids. And then eventually, the head coach, his name was Pat Fresh at the time at PV, he asked me if I would join that staff. And I started coaching at the varsity level in high school. And I probably stayed on. I stayed on even through Guy Gardner. And, it was great fun. We won CIF championships. It was a great experience. If you can't play, it's the next best thing to not being able to play. And I got to coach some great kids.
You certainly did, and you got to coach some great teams. And I remember a lot of those teams had a lot of fun. And,
Yeah.
Those were some really good memories. And that was the first time I met you, of course, was one of the first times I had stepped onto the field at Palos Verdes High. And, that's probably the one program that I've written about the most in my 15 years of reporting high school sports. Now, one other person that I met on the sideline was your younger son, Wyatt. And he is currently with the New York Giants. Instead of going to Palos Verdes, he went to St. John Bosco and then on to Ohio State. And of course, he's currently in the NFL. But what's his journey been like from your perspective?
It has been, it's been a very interesting journey from, Wyatt making the decision to go to St. John Bosco, which was really tough for me because I was coaching at PV at the time. And, the one thing I'll say is that, so Wyatt was one of those kids who was always a big kid. So he only got to play Pop Warner, I think, 1 year, and in that 1 year, I think he was like in 5th or 6th grade, but yet because of his weight, he was playing with 8th graders. So, there was, from a maturity standpoint, he wasn't really ready, but he was so big, so, going into his 6th grade year, there was no way he could make weight. So he started, well, I guess this was in 3rd grade. Because he was playing flag prior to that. So 1 year, he couldn't even make the weight for flag. So we had to find another sport for him to get into. And what he really wanted to do was play basketball. So we went to a basketball tryout at one of the local parks, and there just happened to be a coach there from a third grade travel ball team. And he saw why. He said, "Hey, what grade is that kid?" I go, "Third." He said, "Oh my God. Could you bring him to one of our practices? I'd love for him to play with our club team." So, long story short, boom, yeah, he got into club and travel ball at that point. So, one of the reasons why I gravitated towards Bosco was because he was a travel basketball kid. He actually played basketball at Bosco until he had to stop playing his senior year, partly because Ohio State was like, we love that you're a two-sport kid, but we'd rather you concentrate on getting ready for your freshman year versus playing another year of basketball. So he stopped playing in his senior year. So, it was kind of tough. And I was, to be quite honest, I was really kind of worried about why going to Bosco. And I told him, I said, "You know why? First off, you're talking about a private school in the Trinity League. You're not going to be the biggest kid. You're not going to be the strongest kid. You're going to be playing with kids that have been playing football a while and are probably top rung kids, and, of course he was the biggest kid on the team. so on his freshman team. But, it was mind blowing because I think on his freshman team, there were 125 kids. And I will still say to this day, I look at his freshman team at Bosco, they could have beaten a lot of varsity teams. That's how good they were. And, it was just interesting watching. In fact, I think there might have been off his freshman team, there might have been 7 kids who transferred to other schools because because they had an A and B freshman team, and because they weren't on the A team, they left for their sophomore seasons. Probably at least 7 or 8 kids left, and those 8 kids went to other schools and still got Division I scholarships to other schools. So I was worried about that aspect because I was like, man, that's a long way to go. Why to sit on the bench? And you haven't played football in a long time. And I was a little worried about what his high school football experience was going to be, but, it definitely introduced him to big time football.
And then, of course, he goes on to Ohio State, plays in a Rose Bowl, plays for the national championship.
Yeah.
Is in front of Justin Fields, who's now with Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
And, he's bounced around a little bit, but what has been your message to him in that regard as far as finding a spot for him and continuing to work?
It's just, again, I really do preach the whole having passion about it. And one of the things that we've always just talked about is, sometimes things don't happen in the time frame in which you'd like them to have. And you're going on this journey for a reason. And without getting too spiritual, I do believe God has a plan for everyone. And whatever the reason you're kind of gone through these 3 years that you've gone through, there's a reason for it. And let's not forget what you've been through. And his agent and I always joke, like, when you write your book, it is going to be unbelievable because it's been a journey, and probably the thing that has made me the most proud has been how he's handled adversity. And, he kind of went through it at Ohio State, and he was able to come through there and shine. And, I just think once he gets his opportunity, I think he'll have the same experience, in the NFL. But again, probably the biggest thing we've learned is that you cannot take opportunities for granted.
Now, your part in Little Big League was not a main role, but you did have a very fair amount of screen time. What do you recall about making that movie?
Man, I did not realize how technical hitting was. Like, I'd always had debates with guys about what was the toughest sport. And even Ken and I used to always get in these debates about what's harder, doing a slant or hitting a baseball. And the one thing I learned after Little Big League was hitting the baseball, in my opinion, is the hardest thing in sports to do. I mean, these guys are throwing so hard. And, you talk about Randy Johnson, literally, I think what he's 6'9", 6'7", 6'9". When he releases the ball, it's like it feels like he's about 2 feet from you.
He's halfway to the plate.
Yeah, and that ball is coming. And I remember there was this one kid that was pitching who was playing one of the opposing teams, and he was, with the minor league team in Minneapolis. I remember they had their catcher, their catcher there, and he told me right before my at bat, he said, "Hey man, I'm not trying to get you nervous, but just know this is new for him. He's probably going to be a little nervous, so you might need to be ready to bail out because pitchers can't throw soft; they're just going to throw." I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, sure enough, he hit me right in the ribs, and I was like, "Okay, that's why I quit baseball." That getting hit in the ribs is something I will never forget. And then also, probably one of the things I'll never forget, I had did Little Big League right after the program. And in the program, there was a famous scene where we laid in the street, we had cars going by, and it was starting to be a craze across the country. So Disney panicked, pulled the film off the market for like 2 weeks, and took that scene out and then re-released it.
Disney had the program?
Pardon?
Disney was the program was a
Yes.
Disney movie?
Oh, yeah, wow. It was a Disney movie. Touchstone. And so I'll never forget, was with a bunch of guys we're doing, I think we went out to a dinner or something. We're walking in downtown Minneapolis. We walk out of this bar, and there are these kids laying in the middle of the street with cars going by. And I was just like, wow. Because I hated doing that scene. In fact, I remember telling David Ward, the director of the program, we kind of had a little back and forth because I was like, Alvin would not lay out in the middle of the street. He goes, why? And I said, he's basing his whole career on football. What? There's no way he's laying out in the middle. I mean, yeah, he might say crazy things. He might do crazy things on the football field, but don't get it twisted. He is very serious about football. This is his ticket. He's not going to lay out in the middle of the street and blow it because he got hit by some car. And we were going back and forth, and he just looked at me and said, you know what? Good point, but you're still laying out in the middle of the street. So, did it, but, that was a fun experience. Program was a really fun experience. It was like, going back to college again because we shot all the classroom stuff at Duke, but all the football stuff was shot at the University of South Carolina.
And those campuses aren't too far away from each other, are they?
Well, kinda. One's in North Carolina, others in South Carolina. But like 45-minute flight. So, it was, now Chapel Hill and Duke are literally right there. But South Carolina was a little bit further, but it was great being on a camp, because that was the thing. I was, as I said, in fact, I remember Craig Sheffer and I, because Craig was 32. He was also 30. And we were sitting there talking about, man, we got to get that bead about being in college again and kind of, what is it like kind of being a college football player? And, even though I had done that experience, and I will tell you one night, because, you start mixing with the guys that you're working with who were all football players at the University of South Carolina, and started going out with them. And it only takes a couple nights going, oh, yeah, that's what it is. I forgot. I know what the motivating factor is. So it was easy to kind of go from there and get back into that mindset of being a college football player.
Now, in Little Big League, there were a few future Hall of Famers in Pudge Rodriguez. Of course, you mentioned Randy Johnson, and you did mention Ken Griffey Jr. What was your experience like meeting those guys?
Oh, man. It was, I have met so many athletes because of the program. It's nuts. But it was funny because, we were talking about a mutual guy. We both know Tony Todd. Tony Todd was working on Little Big League, and, we literally we started shooting baseball stuff the last week of the season. So it was the Minnesota Twins into the season, and they happened to be playing the Mariners. So Ken was in town. So, Ken was there, and he's talking to Tony Todd, and he's a movie fanatic. And he said, hey, man, you seen that program? You seen that movie, The Program? Tony said, yeah. He goes, in fact, one of the guys that's on this movie was in the program. And Ken said, wait a minute, not the linebacker. And he goes, yep. And he brought me over. And that was 30 years ago. I met Ken Griffey. And to this day, Ken is one of my closest friends. And we probably talk every other week. So it's been a great 30-year relationship, watching our kids grow and kind of experiencing, all that they've experienced. He's become one of my closest friends.
One of the best baseball players ever, in my opinion. And to that,
an even better man.
And back to that fact, he hit 600 home runs, and it's increasingly harder to get that many to stay healthy. And with his health issues, could he have been the greatest of all time? We will never know.
I don't know that we'll ever see a swing like that again. I mean, and I talked to Ken about that once. And, one of the things that he brought up that was a great point was, because Ken has a brother, but his brother was a football player. And, Ken talked about, he and his brother were both great athletes. His younger brother chose football, though, as his path. And Ken played football too, but baseball was his thing. But, Ken had been taking pretty much BP with the Reds from the time he was like 9 years old. So, to be able to work with one of the greatest hitters with his father, I mean, I don't know that Ken had any choice but to be great. And to be blessed with that type of athleticism. I mean, Ken was a 4.3 40 guy. Just a great athlete. Great athlete.
Now, here's my last question for you, and this one is one that I love asking people. Rolling Stones or the Beatles?
Rolling Stones.
All right, I'll give you that.
Rolling Stones. Yeah, I've been like that for Rolling Stones.
Awesome. Dwayne, thank you very
No problem.
much.
Thank you.